She was 18 and sleeping in the back seat of her father's old truck after being thrown out with nothing but a backpack, 2 sweaters, and $83 in cash. Rain tapped softly against the windows that night, cold rain. The kind that made everything smell like rust and wet dirt. She kept staring at the cracked windshield while trucks passed on the highway beside the gas station where she had parked. Every few minutes the truck shook slightly from the wind. Nobody called. Not her mother. Not her older brother. Not even her aunt who used to sneak her birthday cards with $5 bills inside. At sunrise she opened her phone and searched the cheapest properties she could legally buy. Most were impossible. Tax traps. Burned houses. Broken sheds. Then she found it, an abandoned boat repair shop near a dying fishing town on the coast, price $1. The listing had only 3 photos: a leaning wooden building, a collapsed dock, a faded sign that read Bellamy Marine Repair. The description was, only 1 sentence: property sold as is, nobody wanted it. The place had been empty for almost 20 years. 3 days later she drove there alone with half a tank of gas and a paper bag full of gas station food. But what she didn't know was something had been hidden beneath those floorboards long before she was born. Something connected to a story the town itself had nearly forgotten. And the first night she slept inside the repair shop, she heard something moving underneath the floor. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, stories about second chances, forgotten places, and people rebuilding their lives from nothing, take a moment to subscribe. And while you listen, think about this. Have you ever felt like the world closed every door on you at once? Because that was exactly how her story began. Her name was Ellie Harper. She grew up in a narrow rental house beside the railroad tracks, in a town most people only passed through. At night the trains shook the kitchen, cabinets. Her grandfather used to joke that the house breathed with the tracks. Ellie loved her grandfather more than anyone else in the family. His name was Walter. He smelled like cedarwood machine oil and peppermint candy. Every Sunday morning he sat on the porch sharpening old tools while drinking black coffee from a chipped green mug. He had once worked near the coast repairing fishing boats decades earlier. Not big luxury boats, small working boats, the kind owned by tired men with cracked hands and permanent sunburns. When Ellie was little, she used to sit beside him and ask questions about every tool. What's this one for? How do engines float? What happens if a boat sinks? Walter never rushed his answers. He believed slow work lasted longer. Everything speaks if you listen carefully enough, he used to tell her. Wood speaks, engines speak, water too. Her father hated hearing that. He called Walter old-fashioned, said fixing boats was dead work, for dead towns. Ellie's father bounced between jobs for years. Construction deliveries, warehouse shifts. When money got tight, tension filled the house like smoke. Some nights nobody talked during dinner. Only forks scraping plates. Her mother tried to keep peace, but exhaustion slowly hollowed her out. Bills piled on the counter. The refrigerator hummed louder because there was less food inside. Still, Walter kept showing Ellie little things: how to patch cracked wood, how to oil rusted hinges, how to listen for problems instead of looking for them. You hear before you see, he would say. When Ellie turned 13, Walter gave her a tiny brass compass. Old scratched heavy people get lost. Slowly, he told her quietly. Not all at once. She carried it everywhere after that. Then Walter got sick. It started with coughing. Then long silences, then days where even standing exhausted him. Ellie sat beside his bed reading old repair manuals aloud, because he liked hearing the pages turn. One evening during heavy rain, Walter asked her to open the window. He stared outside for a long time. You know what ruins most people, he whispered. Ellie shook her head. They stopped believing forgotten things still have value. Those words stayed with her. After he died, the house changed. Completely. Her father drank more. Her mother worked longer hours. The little routines disappeared. No more coffee smell in the mornings. No more tools on the porch. Walter's workshop behind the house slowly filled with dust. Ellie started going there alone. sometimes just to smell the old wood and engine grease because it reminded her of him. At 16, she got a part-time job at a grocery store. At 17, she was helping pay electric bills, and a few months after turning 18, everything exploded. Her father lost another job. There was shouting almost every night. One evening, after a brutal argument about money, he snapped, "You're an adult now," he yelled. "If you want a life so bad, go build one." Her mother cried silently near the sink, but she didn't stop him. Ellie packed that same night. No screaming. No dramatic goodbye, just quiet heartbreak. She left carrying Walter's compass, a backpack, and the feeling that nobody was coming after her. The drive to the coast took almost 11 hours. The farther she drove, the emptier the roads became. Gas stations disappeared, phone signal faded in and out. The air slowly changed too. By evening she could smell salt through the cracked truck window. The town was called Greyhaven once. It had been a busy fishing town. Now it looked half asleep. Boarded shops, empty parking lots, faded signs swinging. In the wind even, the harbor sounded tired. Loose ropes tapped softly against old docks. The repair shop sat at the far edge of town near marsh grass and dark water. It looked worse than the photos. One side leaned slightly. Several windows were cracked. The dock behind it had partially sunk into black water. Ellie stood there in silence while gulls cried overhead. For a moment she almost drove away, but then she touched the brass compass in her pocket and stayed. Inside, the building smelled like mildew salt water, and ancient wood dust floated through thin beams of evening light. Old tools still hung on walls. A rusted winch sat near the back. There were faded outlines on the floor where machines once stood. The place felt frozen, like people had simply vanished. One day, that first night, she made a bed from old blankets in the office corner. The wind groaned through loose boards outside. Water slapped softly beneath the dock, and sometime after midnight, she heard it. A dull knock, under the floor, 3 slow taps. Then, silence. Ellie froze. Another knock came a few minutes later. Not pipes, not wind, something underneath. The next morning she convinced herself it was animals. Probably rats. The building was ancient. Still, the sound bothered her. She spent the day cleaning, sweeping, glass dragging broken wood outside, opening stuck windows. Every object she touched seemed connected to another forgotten life. A coffee thermos still sitting on a shelf, a calendar from 1998A. Child's drawing tucked inside a drawer showing a fishing boat and 3 stick figures. Near sunset, she noticed something strange. One section of the floor sounded different. Hollow. Not everywhere, just near the old engine lift. She crouched slowly and tapped again. Thunk, thunk, echo. Her stomach tightened. That night, she barely slept. The wind was louder, and around 2 in the morning, the knocking returned. 3 taps, pause, then 2 more. She grabbed a flashlight. The beam shook in her hands as she crossed the room. The sound stopped the moment she stepped over the hollow section. Ellie stared down at the floorboards. The wood there looked slightly newer than the rest. Not new, just less worn, as if someone had replaced it years later. She backed away slowly. Outside, fog rolled across the harbor. The entire town felt like it was holding its breath. Over the next week, Ellie tried learning more about the shop. Most locals avoided talking about it, especially older fishermen. Some pretended not to hear her questions, others simply shrugged. Finally, an old man at the bait store spoke. "Bellamy owned that place," he muttered. "Good mechanic, quiet man." "What happened to him?" Ellie asked. The man looked toward the harbor before answering. "Disappeared." That word stayed with her all day. Disappeared. No explanation. No body, nothing. Later that afternoon, Ellie found old newspaper clippings inside a cabinet. Most were ruined by moisture, but one headline remained readable. Local boat repairman missing after storm. The article mentioned a man named Thomas Bellamy, owner of the repair shop, vanished during a severe coastal storm nearly 20 years earlier. No suspects. No answers. Ellie kept reading until she noticed handwritten words in the margin, tiny words, almost hidden. not in the water. Her skin prickled. That night she checked the floorboards again. This time, she noticed faint scrape marks nearby, as if something heavy had once been dragged across the floor days past. Ellie kept repairing the shop slowly. She sold scrap metal for food money, learned how to patch roofing, watched repair videos at the library because the shop barely had electricity. Some nights she cried quietly from exhaustion. Other nights she sat on the dock listening to waves slap against rotten wood. And slowly she began feeling less afraid of the silence. One evening, while cleaning the back storage room, she discovered an old toolbox hidden beneath tarps. Inside was a folded photograph. 3 men standing beside a fishing boat. One of them matched the photo from the newspaper clipping, Thomas Bellamy. Written on the back were the words, "Built to last." Underneath that a symbol. A tiny compass. Exactly like the one Walter gave her. Ellie stared at it for a long time. Her hands trembled. How could her grandfather know this place? Why had he never mentioned it that night? She opened Walter's old toolbox from the truck inside, hidden beneath wrenches. She found a yellowed receipt, Bellamy Marine Repair, dated 31 years earlier. Ellie's chest tightened. Walter had been here. Rain hammered the roof 2 nights. Later, water leaked through cracks into metal buckets Ellie had placed around the shop. She couldn't sleep. The storm sounded alive. Then came the noise again. 3 knocks closer this time. She grabbed a pry bar and flashlight, heart pounding. Slowly she moved, toward the hollow section. The sound came once more, directly beneath her feet. Ellie jammed the pry bar between 2 boards. The wood resisted at first, then cracked upward suddenly. A cold gust of air rose from below. She aimed the flashlight down darkness. Narrow space beneath the floor, not natural built. She widened the opening carefully. Underneath was a hidden crawl space, and inside, a small metal door. The lock had rusted almost completely. Ellie hit it twice with a hammer until it snapped. The metal, daughter groaned. Open dust exploded into the air. The space beyond was larger than she expected, almost like a hidden room. The flashlight beam moved slowly across shelves, crates, and water-stained walls. Then it landed on something covered by canvas. Ellie pulled the fabric away. Wooden boxes inside the first one were stacks of old cash sealed in plastic, not millions, but enough to change a life. Her breathing became uneven. She opened another crate, old coins, jewelry, watches, emergency savings hidden long ago. It wasn't the valuables that froze her. It was the journal, a thick leather journal sitting carefully inside a waterproof tin. Beside it rested an old brass compass matching hers exactly. Ellie opened the journal slowly. The first page read, "If anyone finds this, it means Thomas was right not to trust them." Her hands shook harder. Page after page described corrupt men in the town years earlier, insurance scams, boat sabotage, stolen payouts after storms. Thomas Bellamy had discovered everything, and Walter had helped him repair damaged boats secretly for struggling fishermen who couldn't afford the corruption. They planned to expose the operation, but before they could, Thomas vanished. Near the final pages, Ellie found Walter's handwriting. "I told Thomas to hide the savings here. If anything happens, maybe one day someone honest will find it." Ellie covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Her grandfather had known. Not everything, but enough. The final note was addressed directly to whoever carries the compass next. "Build something better than we did." Ellie cried there on the cold floor for a long time. Not because of the money, because suddenly, after feeling abandoned for so long, she realized someone from the past had believed in her before she even arrived. Ellie didn't become rich overnight. Most of the money went toward legal repairs, taxes, and restoring the building safely. The valuables helped too, but many were tied to old ownership claims. The process took months. There were setbacks, constantly, leaks, broken, wiring permits, days where she thought she would fail anyway. But little by little things changed. An older fisherman named Jonah began helping occasionally. At first he only brought spare wood, then tools, then advice. "You work like Walter," he told her once. Quietly. Ellie looked up sharply. "You knew him?" Jonah nodded. "Long time ago." More pieces slowly connected. Walter had spent one summer in Greyhaven decades earlier after losing work inland. That was where he met Thomas Bellamy. That was where he learned marine repair, and that was where he learned that forgotten towns still mattered. Ellie restored the repair shop one room at a time. Fresh paint, new windows, repaired dock boards. The first boat she ever repaired herself took 3 weeks. She made mistakes constantly, but when the engine finally started, she laughed so hard she cried afterward. For the first time in years, her life felt like it belonged to her. People in town slowly returned too. Fishermen, travelers, locals curious about the girl rebuilding the dead repair shop. Someone painted a new sign outside Bellamy and Harper Marine Repair. Ellie stared at it for nearly an hour the day it went up because for the first time since Walter died, the future didn't feel empty. People think treasure changes your life instantly. Sometimes the real treasure is proof that your pain meant something. Proof that someone before you survived hard things too. Ellie had spent most of her life believing she came from failure. Broken jobs, broken family, broken promises, but hidden beneath those floorboards wasn't just money. It was legacy, patience, skill, trust. The reminder that forgotten things still carried value, just like Walter said. And maybe that's true for people too. Maybe some lives only look abandoned from the outside. Nearly 2 years later, Ellie stood alone on the repaired dock at sunrise. The harbor looked different now, cleaner, alive again. Fishing boats moved slowly across golden water while gulls circled overhead. The repair shop behind her glowed warmly in the early morning light. She still kept Walter's compass in her jacket pocket. Some habits never leave. She thought back to that first night in the truck, cold, hungry, alone. Certain her life had ended before it even started. But now she understood something Walter tried to teach her all along. People get lost slowly, and sometimes they find themselves the same way, one quiet step at a time. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more emotional mystery stories like this one, and in the comments tell us about someone in your life who taught you something small that you never forgot. Sometimes those quiet lessons end up changing everything.